So when we talk about solving the generator function there to anti-rival risk games, that doesn't just... Creating an anti-rival risk environment obviously requires changing macroeconomics, because my balance sheet is the scorecard of a finite rival risk game. It requires not having in-group, out-groups like nations. Those things become obsolete, or religions, or race identifications in any deep kind of sense, right? These are deep changes. It requires not having things like democracy, where we make a proposition that is ill-formed, or if the proposition goes through, it benefits something and harms something else. And if it doesn't go through, then something else is protected and something else is harmed, as opposed to had it went through, which will always lead to groups of people based on which of the needs that they have more cluster around one side versus the other, which now creates polarization and eventually radicalization, which then eventually has to be stabilized in war, but wars that we can't keep having with exponentially increasing military tech that become actually unwinnable. Creating an anti-rival risk environment is a non-trivial thing. It's this kind of thing humanity's never done, but we have to do something we've never done, because every civilization that we've ever had so far has all collapsed. But now we have a fully global civilization where the collapse is actually catastrophic. And so when Rome fell, it was a lot, but it wasn't the whole world, right? When the Mayans fell, the Inca fell, Mesopotamia, Sumeria, any of those, it wasn't everything. Now we have a fully globalized supply chain economy that is also connected to the biosphere in such deep ways that collapse is really a catastrophic collapse. So given that the system's always failed for these reasons, we have to do something that the world has never done before. We also, though, have increased capacities that the world has never had, and we have to realize them to guide the other capacities that are coming on board. So the reason I'm saying all this is because creating an anti-rival risk environment doesn't only prevent X risk, it also changes the underlying basis of what has sucked about humans for the whole history of humans. Those rival risk bases are why we have fought wars and tortured and hurt the environment, and etc. And we've made whole philosophies around the nature of duality and the mixed bag that humans are, that are really just based on the game theoretic environment we've been in. We can create a different environment that doesn't incentivize, right, harm, because as long as I am incentivized to do something that is harmful to you, it can't be prevented at scale. But we can actually change that underlying incentive and make it to where your well-being and mine are more tightly coupled, and yours, mine, and the commons are more tightly coupled. This is not communism or socialism or anything that has ever been presented. It's totally new shit that, again, is outside of the scope of what we can talk about today, but we can, if people are interested, we can talk about sometime. There actually are very real paths for how to do this. But in the process of solving the generator function, so that one that I mentioned is one. There are other ones. Solving the generator functions of catastrophic risk, we're also solving the basis of the historical human suck dynamics and bringing about a really radically different humanity. And so, if we have an intentional community today that is trying to prototype some ideals, but they still, to get the computer that we're talking on, have to buy it from Apple, which has to get minerals that came from conflict zones and rainforests over 6 continents and was made in factories where there are nets on the windows so that workers don't commit suicide because the conditions are so shitty, and then our lovely village is still being supported by the tragedy of the whole rest of the thing, right? So until we can actually get a high-tech, closed-loop civilization that does not require import, that is actually more adaptive than the previous civilization, we haven't yet shown we can do that thing. That happens at the scale of a high-tech city-state. City-state meaning it has to be sovereign in law. City meaning that's the minimum kind of scale of self-organization that could actually produce all of its own needs. So by 2050, I want to see a fully operating city-state new civilization model that is anti-rival risks, that has the right relationship between complicated and complex systems, all the other dynamics that we need. And I want to see that having been operating long enough and well enough that the rest of the world is already starting to move in the direction that it is setting an example of. And that means also off of the X-risk path.